Well, it doesn't make any difference.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Is it coming through? Huh?
It's recording all right.
Okay. All right.
Say a few more words.
Say a few more words.
Yeah, this was the 13th of January 1973. We're in
This is January the 13th, 1973. The occasion is the dedication of the new sports arena on the University of North Dakota. We are in the banquet room, waiting for the banquet, which will begin at 1 o'clock this afternoon. Let us pray. We are here before you, O God, seeking your blessing as we take part in the activities involved in the dedication of this beautiful memorial arena for the use of the Fighting Sioux. Our minds and thoughts take us back in history to the beginnings of hockey in this institution of higher learning. We take pride and are grateful for your abundant blessings, which brought big-time collegiate hockey to North Dakota with its team in the year 1947. We are happy to have so many of this original team with us today and look to them as the exemplification of the lessons taught on this sheet of ice of fair play and sportsmanship, giving all you have for the development of youth to be a credit to this university and to themselves. Down through the years, the Sioux hockey players have been a credit in this vast field of sports, as we see from the many fine young men recognized by all to be All-Americans. We are also grateful for the help and influence of all the coaches, players, and friends of the Sioux who in some way helped to bring about the building and now the dedication of this very fine arena. May the many physical advantages offered here initiate as many spiritual blessings, so that as we properly take care of our minds and bodies, we might spiritually grow into the Olympics of your heavenly kingdom. Help us fittingly to enjoy the festivities connected with today's celebration. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
I think it appropriate at this time that we have a moment of silence for 7 people that have been connected to this University of North Dakota hockey program that are no longer with us. Faculty Representative Archie Koth, Dr. Ralph Lee, coaches Don Norman and John Jameson, hockey players Bill Borowski, Prince Johnson, Terry Casey, and Tommy Hoghog. It was 25 years ago, this past Wednesday, at the University of North Dakota, the Sioux defeated the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor 6-5 on a goal by North Dakota's first All-American and U.S. Olympic silver medal winning star John Noah. From that point on, the University of North Dakota went on to become one of the perennial hockey powers of the country. However, it was not all that easy. The university played on the club basis until that season, and it all came about after the war when such people as Cal Marvin talked to a number of returning servicemen to come to the university to play hockey. This, coupled with the enthusiastic help of the athletic director Glenn Red Jarrett, Dean Harrington, and Coach Don Norman, put it all together for the Sioux. The Sioux came out on the ice that night in Ann Arbor in football jerseys, and a team that featured such men on its roster as Bob Murray in the nets, who had more saves than Billy Graham. The brothers McKinnon, Dan and Paul, Cal Marvin, who also doubled as loan administrator to the Sioux. Prince and Buzz Johnson, out of Webster, South Dakota, by way of junior hockey in Edmonton, Alberta. And also members of the United States national team. Joe Silovich, featuring the custom-made skates of his hero, John Mariucci. Jim Medved, one of the classiest center icemen to play for the Sioux. Guinea Christian, one of the Sioux's most prolific hockey scorers, who also threw out so many butt ends that his two brothers had to form a hockey stick factory, the Christian brothers, to put it all together for him. Bobby Krumholtz, now Dr. Krumholtz, who thought it better to repair teeth than to have them knocked out. Wes Cole, the Sioux's Denny Hextall at that time. Teddy Wilson, the professor, and George Dickinson, the man with the poker face. Jim Slop Doyle. Bill Sullivan, who still has the records for the most goals by a Sioux in a game. Art Furman, another net tender who refused to ride the bus to Houghton because of excess snow. Student manager Bob Rowe, a real-life Inspector Erskine, who was also taken for the coach because of his natty dress. It is interesting to note that 6 members of that team representing the United States in the Olympics are on the United States national team. From this team evolved a succession of players such as Ralph Engelstad, who learned his lessons well in school and went on to financial glory with the man of the tennis shoes, now holed up in England, one Howard Hughes. The University of North Dakota hockey team, a charter member of the premier college hockey conference of the country, has finished in the top 4 positions for 13 out of the 20 years of the WCHA and have never finished in last place. They appeared in 6 NCAA championships and were NCAA national champions in 59 and 63. Both championships were won in the East, Troy, New York, and Boston. They were runner-up once and beat the great Cornell goalie Ken Dryden, now of the Montreal Canadiens. 15 University of North Dakota hockey players have won 22 All-American First Team awards, named by the American Hockey Coaches Association. The latest being Alan Hankslayton, who won the award as a freshman, almost an unprecedented situation. 10 players have represented the United States on Olympic and U.S. national teams, with Billy Reichert being named captain of the '64 team. 3 former Sioux players are now playing in the National Hockey League. One in the World Hockey Association, Dennis Hextall with the Minnesota North Stars, John Marks with the Chicago Blackhawks, Dave Hudson with the New York Islanders, and lefty Mike Kerr with the St. Paul Saints. 4 former Sioux players have gone on to become college coaches. Bill Selman, former Sioux coach and now coach of the St. Louis Billikens. Jerry Walford, coach of Ohio State. Bob Johnson, coach of the University of Wisconsin. Bob Peters, former Sioux coach and now at Bemidji State. The University of North Dakota, in all-time competition with the 10 other members of the Western Collegiate Hockey Association, hold winning records over every other team, except the University of Wisconsin and Notre Dame, which they are tied. Notre Dame, incidentally, played the first game in a conference game in the history of their school at the Old Barn last year, which was quite a place in history for Notre Dame. Who will ever forget the solo dashes of Buzz Johnson, bedecked with a white towel wrapped around his neck, and his colorful brother Prince, now deceased, who possessed that rare element called charisma. Jolting Joe Silovich, featuring, of course, the Mariucci skates, and missing the train connection at Minneapolis to Colorado Springs. Donnie Ross, 2-time All-American and U.S. Olympic star, still the highest scoring defenseman at the University of North Dakota. Coach Barry Thornycrafts, in again, out again, and finally out again, jockeying with the Department of Immigration. Amo Bassini being hung in effigy at the Old Barn. Pop Noyes, running the greatest non-Chinese laundry in the country in the depths of the old rink. The Sioux's greatest fan, George Smith, speaking ex cathedra at all time on college hockey. The Oral Roberts School of Coaching is applied by Bob May. The pacing of in the box by Coach Bill Selman with arms folded, looking like a mighty Joe Young. Coach Bob Peters disc jockeying a between-period pep talk to the strains of a 3 Dog Night record. And Coach Rube Bjorkman holding forth during the game like a pope with a pen in hand. The colorful Fido Perper, the former coach who furnished the impetus for hockey in Grand Forks in the North Dakota state. Billy Steenson being named an All-American 3 years in a row. The 4 consecutive shutouts of goalie Spike Schultz until he fell in love. Reg Morelli's winning goal in the Sioux's first NCAA championship in Troy, New York. The Most Valuable Player award by Al McLean in the Sioux's second NCAA championship in Boston. George Chigols scoring 3 goals in 1 minute and 15 seconds and making Sports Illustrated. Dave Cardio also making Sports Illustrated, scoring 4 goals and defeating Denver 4-1. President Starcher taking a pratfall on the ice in the Winter Carnival ceremonies. One of the greatest moves since Yvonne Cornwallis. The first hockey school held in the United States at the old Winter Sports Building by now General Manager Emil Francis of the New York Rangers. Gordie Howe playing an exhibition in the old barn. The ever-present face and always helping hand of one Al Perper. Kenny Johansson's keeping the puck by himself for an interminable time against the Crimson of Harvard. The 2 referees, Jack McKee and Pete Ullman. The loaded trains to Minneapolis. The lineups for the old Minnesota series. These are but a small number of the many incidents that were part of the history of the University of North Dakota. The amazing thing to this whole story is the university has reached this position in college hockey and playing in one of the worst hockey rinks in the country with practices and games held in below zero weather. Now the University of North Dakota is playing in certainly the top college rink in the country. It's been by knowledgeable hockey people, and I was just talking to one of the National Hockey League scouts in town, and he said, absolutely the finest rink in the country. It's been built, and it was built, not by the state of North Dakota, but it was built by UND students, faculty, alumni, and friends of the university. We are here this day for the dedication of this magnificent new facility with the knowledge that the University of North Dakota will climb to even greater heights, if that's possible. Now I'd like to call on Len Marty to introduce some of the people in the audience. Len?
Thank you, Bob. That was a glowing story of UND hockey. This is Bob Buston, in case you don't know him. He's our MC today. Bob was one of our hockey managers, and he's a hockey nut if there ever was one.
But not anyhow.
He's almost as much a hockey nut as my wife. I don't sit near her very often because she's so loud, but she is a hockey bug, and so I have to introduce her. Mrs. Marty, would you stand? And we have with us Mrs. Jamie Jameson. I think it was John, but you know, all we ever call him was Jamie. And I'm not sure what his first name was. Would you stand, Mrs. Jameson? And then Margaret Jarrett, Glenn Jarrett. I worked with Glenn for 12 years. Margaret Jarrett. And Mrs. Rube Bjorkman, our coach's wife. If Rube wins, they have steak after the game. If he loses, they have nothing. They go without any food. Mrs. Al Perper, Al is up in front here. And Vi almost ought to be ready for an award, too. She's been running our concessions now for so many years that I've forgotten how many. We have some other people scattered around. We tried to get them all to the reserve table, but they had groups that they were with, so we'll try to find them. Close by we have Mrs. Art Koth. He was referred to in the history. Mrs. Koth. Mrs. Prince Johnson and their son, they're over here someplace. Would you stand, please? We have a few people at the head table, and their wives are scattered about. Mrs. Cal Marvin, where are you, Mrs. Marvin? Way over there. Mrs. Lloyd Stone, with her family someplace. Where are you, Grace? We have the chairman, or the faculty representative on our athletic board, Mr. R.D. Copenhavers, here someplace. Cope. I see one of our vice presidents out here, Vice President for Operation, Lauren Swanson. Lauren? We had two lettermen who were co-chairmen for really arranging this old-timers get-together, John Noah and Cal Marvin. Cal is up here. John and Mrs. Noah are out in the audience, and they'll be on duty tonight. Would you stand, John and Mrs. Noah? You know, when you start introducing a lot of people, you might miss some. I should really introduce everybody, but maybe Bob will do that a little later on, all the old-time players. I have one other individual at the head table here, two other individuals, and I would like to introduce them. Mrs. Tom Clifford, wife of our president. And now the other gentleman up here. He needs no introduction to the hockey players. He was referred to in this history. He is just Pop to all of us, and it's an extreme pleasure to have Pop with us today and to visit with the old-timers. Pop. We're glad you could be with us. He's getting sprier every day, I think. You know, a while back he wasn't moving around like he is now, but he does a great job for us and did for many, many years, and we really miss him around here. Bob, I think that pretty well covers all of our introductions.
Okay, I'd like to call on President Thomas Clifford for a few comments.
Thank you very much, Bob, and everyone. This is a weekend that we've been looking forward to for quite a long time, and I suppose everyone's just about as thrilled as I am. But in addition to dedicating this marvelous facility today, I think the real highlight of the weekend for me is to see all of the players coming back and to visit with them. I've known quite a few of them through the years, and it's a real pleasure to see you all here, and I'm just so happy you could come back to the campus. I got to know some of them pretty well, of course, through the years, and this team in 1947 was the one that I probably knew the best. They had as their house mother an ex-Marine by the name of Cal Marvin, and I got to know them that same way too, because President West found out I'd been in the Marine Corps, and he appointed me Dean of Men and asked me to conduct some sensitivity training for them. And we did that. You know, in those old days, why, we had a little rule at the university that if you missed a class, if so many classes, you owed so many course credits, you know. I think it was something like you had 8 cuts, you got 3 credits lost. And they had a great team record. I think they were the only group that ever went, as 15 of them went to class for the whole semester and owed the university 32 credits. I always remember Guinea Christian, you know, he was a tremendous skater. And he was just all grace on the ice. I mean, the most graceful man I've ever seen in skating, really, except maybe Reg Morelli. And I got a call from the ROTC one day, and they said, you know, we'd like to get Christian out of here. They said, he can't march. And I said, impossible. You got to march. So I went over there, and they had me sit up in the balcony, and they marched Guinea's platoon by. You know, if you ever watch the file of rifles go by, you know, and they're going the proper cadence, why, it's all even. Well, there were 7 of them were even, but Guinea wasn't, you know. He managed to come up all the way with a little different step. But he did well on the ice. Well, I could go on and talk about a lot of the people that way, because we've had a lot of great teams and a lot of great athletes here. I think that one of the most interesting episodes, of course, in our entire hockey career was when Fido Perper was the coach. And Fido and I had a lot of good times together. Margaret, you'll be interested to know that some of our greatest challenges, I think, were to come back and explain our expense accounts to Red Jarrett. That wasn't easy. We, especially trying to work in Coors beer as a meal. That was always a little tough. But we had a lot of fun, and he gave us some of the most exciting teams we've ever had. And Fido, it was so good to see you here today, be with us. I saw your old friend John Mariucci there last night, and he said he's going to give you a few choice comments today. But to all of you, it's so nice to have you back. We are looking forward to tonight, to the ball game, of course, and more particularly to the dedication. It's just a tremendous facility, and we owe so much to so many because for it. As I said, we waited an awful long time to get this put together, and there are some people we probably won't get a chance to expressly honor tonight, but there are people that had a lot to do with getting this arena put together. And I just want to mention them, maybe Len would later on, but just in case, I just want to pay particular tribute to John O'Keefe, who was right over here. John is the guy that put the drive together downtown, and Earl Strinden, the alumni, worked with him, and Len Marty and Tom Flanders and Lloyd Stone, but John had the burden of putting the drive together and organizing it, and he just did a marvelous job, and we're all so appreciative of it, and I'm sure, John, you got from the applause how good everybody feels about it. And then, you know, this has been a series of continued crises from the time of the first planning of the auditorium, when we got the first $2,500 from Lloyd to conduct the survey. But one of the things that most of you won't know, but it was very important, last July, I guess, we're sweating out the seats, and we got this thing. If you ever heard of getting a building on the installment plan, this is one. We got the shell, and then we got a roof, and then we got the ice, and then we got the plastic sideboards and all of this thing, but we came down to the point where we didn't have the seats. And George Smith came in about that time, who's been a very great hockey fan and supporter, and we sat down the Westward Hole one morning, and he said, you know, we've got to get those seats. And he said, I'll get you a good bid if you get the money, and we both came through. But George, we do appreciate that, because he saved us just a tremendous sum of money, and when you look there tonight and see those green and white seats, those very comfortable benches, he's had a lot to do with that. And George, I want to pay tribute to you, because that was just fine. So that's just about been the story on it. It's a combined effort of a lot of people, and it's culminated in a lot of good. So we're looking forward to tonight, and thank you all for being here.
Our next speaker is President Emeritus George Starcher, who really should have written that book instead of next in my 7 crises when it was involved in taking over this rank. President Starcher.
Ladies and gentlemen, if I were to address all of the dignitaries here, I'd spend all my time and more just reading and just reciting names. Needless to say, I'm delighted that your President Clifford made it necessary that I be here, but just invite me. And I wouldn't have missed it for anything. When I came in 1954 to the University of North Dakota, I didn't even know you played hockey with a flat thing. I thought it was something you do with a ball, but I found out. But I was told, I think it was Red Jarrett and some others showed me around along with the deans and other people, taking me all around every place except where that snowdrift was formed. And I was told that all the troubles are over in hockey because we just got artificial ice the previous year. You remember, 1953. And so we'd have no problems in hockey from that point on. Well, I was glad of that because obviously Old Main was falling down. We had to get an Old Main built and some other things. It would be nice to have one part of the university with nothing to worry about. I remember it wasn't very long, though, until somebody began to worry about the fact that the pucks flew up over the boards rather easily and thought we ought to have some kind of protectors. And glass was called for. Well, glass would cost more. Well, it'd been about as easy to get glass around there as it was to get the entire hockey rink this time. So we finally compromised on chicken wire, and everybody began to complain about the height of that. But after a little blood showed when a couple of pucks went over the wire, I remember we didn't hear any more about that. And I do remember the time I fell for the Queen at the KK Carnival, you remember. That's one of the memories that'll be indelibly on my mind. I'll never forget. kind of you all not to do the obvious, too. You were very quiet for a while. But I have a most embarrassing moment that way that I can tell people. I often am asked about my experience as a president. I remember in one circle, someone spoke up and said, "Tell us now what's your most embarrassing moment." Well, I had one on tap. There wasn't very much talk of a new building, really. With the artificial ice, wasn't much to talk about, maybe. But we all huddled together, along those seats lined up in rows. I remember one time I sat next to a very prominent and well-known and possibly here hockey fan and his wife. And they shared their thermos of coffee with me, and my wife and I thought that was the best coffee we ever tasted. And I want them to know we appreciate it. Went around the next day to try to get the brand name of the stuff. We used to get warm, I remember, it seemed to me, more from bouncing around against each other, somewhat on the principle of the microwave oven, than we did from the little heat that came out in the warming rooms, or from the concessions that was available mostly to those on the periphery of the crowd. But we weren't so cold, as I recall. But sitting there on those benches, tight together, reminded me of the students who used to sit in the old Yale fence after dinner at night on into the evening chat, and they'd break up. The historian of Yale expressed that phenomenon this way. He said, "Night after night it," meaning the old fence, "night after night it receives innumerable rivulets of common leisure. Thigh to thigh sits scholar, athlete, and bohemian in a guild of fellowship far better than the dusty ruts of learning." Well, I thought that kind of reminded me of our sitting in those rows in the old hockey rink. There got to be more talk about the need for a building, but then it seemed that sometimes there were more empty seats. And so there were those who said, "Look, you don't need a new building, really. We aren't filling the seats in the one we got." But then there were people who insisted that people would come if you had a place that was reasonably warm and comfortable where they could sit and watch the game. There were even people in Grand Forks, believe it or not, who probably unconsciously were quoting President Lyndon Johnson's last sentence to a United Nations group in a speech when he said, "What was for other generations a hope is for us a simple necessity." And that kind of caught on, I feel. At least the idea caught on. I don't think there are enough people who would take a Democrat speech and make so much of it, but the idea that the hope is really for us critical, simple necessity, caught on. But then the question always came up, but how can we get such a rink? Well, the alumni, as alumni are prone to do sometimes, went ahead and got a sketch made. They sometimes dart in and do things, that a little thought would tell you is impossible. There was a sketch made, and estimates were made, and the estimates came out to be far above the amount of money available in the state of North Dakota. And so it seemed as though it was something to be impossible. But I'll always remember a small group, and I won't try to name them because it'd surely leave out one or two, and that wouldn't be fair, who met in the alumni office to talk this thing over finally, and either we'll kill it or we'll go ahead and determine. But this small group was pretty obvious, just simply weren't ready to let this idea die. There were even those who believed that the students would support it strongly, and that the townspersons. And they also believed that perhaps the estimates could be brought down by some changes in the building. And they also believed that you could even get 5,000 people to go to a single hockey game. And so from that meeting on, planning began to develop. And many, many people, as you know, have heard and will hear over and over, got involved with it. And as they got involved, it seems to me they were beginning to express a thought that has been expressed and quoted many times of Daniel Burnham, the city planner, who said make no little plans. Little plans, he said, have no magic with which to sear men's blood, and little plans probably would not be realized anyway. Make big plans, aim high. Our sons and their sons will do things that would stagger us. Remember, when you create something that captures the imagination, you capture life, reason, everything. Well, again, whether that was ever quoted exactly in those words, the spirit, I think, was evident. And then there was the response of the community. People gave to create a kind of memorial, or at least themselves a part of a memorial, that would be far better than a piece of stone on some public square somehow. Somehow people just knew. A starless sky reveals no gleam. Life is dismal without a dream. And one individual said, in less lofty language, in God's closing crap game, I want to be where the action is, and he gave. Partly, I think, to walk with eternity for having helped build a university. For one never knows where or how long his influence carries on through a university, unchanged, undiminished, indestructible. So I'd like to add my word of thanks to all of you. First of all, I think of the athletes for making all of it a necessity, and all of those who knew the university and its needs and who responded with their support. I think that you have said clearly that good hockey will continue at the university. You planted a great tree whose shade you cannot always enjoy, but others can. And you make me feel very humble and grateful for the chance to be a part of a sharing, sacrificing group that together has built here a monument to ideals that you cherish and without which the university could be great, I'm sure, but it would be a lesser place than it surely will be from now on. I'd like to conclude by paraphrasing Maxwell Anderson, saying that the old Winter Sports Building is retired now, proud to have been here during all of those years when UND needed it so badly, surrounded by memories of great moments of victory and some equally great depths of disappointment. But here the tradition carries on bigger, better, yet just as personal as each puck and brick placed in those walls personally by each one of you. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, President Starcher. Wes Christopherson, the alumni president, couldn't be here today. He had a daughter, I believe, that had a broken arm in Lake Forest, and he had to go back. But we've got in his place and on our stage the world's greatest alumni director and my good friend, J. Lloyd Stone.
Thank you, Bob. I trained Bob, you see, at the university. He worked for me for 2 or 3 years when he was at the university. He was a very faithful worker. He doesn't know it, but I know that about half the time he put in for me, he was over coaching the hockey team over in the Winter Sports Building. But we were glad to pay him for that. I know, too, he was one of the greatest hockey enthusiasts we've ever had at the university. It isn't his fault that we didn't have this ice arena, this new arena, 15, 20 years ago. He pushed us hard enough. Mary Christopherson didn't break her arm. She's 12 years old and she hopes to play on the Sioux hockey team someday, so she was out practicing hockey and she broke her leg. And so Wes had to go back to Lake Forest to help look after his daughter. Jack Stewart would like to have been here today. Many of you know Jack Stewart, one of the most loyal alums. He's the fellow probably most responsible for building the University Stadium. But he had been very ill for 2 or 3 months, and he's only home from the hospital now. I talked to him on the phone the other day and told him about his dedication, and I said, what would you like to have said here after this dedication? You know, he was the fellow who helped spearhead this thing. He encouraged us to go ahead. even when the money wasn't available. But he said, you might tell them that we were really making progress. He said, when I was in school, I remember we played hockey in the big lacrosse in the Sick McCarthy House, where the student union is now located. And he said, I remember what a great day it was. We got boards around the arena, the outdoor arena. And he said, you might tell them about that. And even before that, he said, they used to play hockey out in the coulee. The boys from Mud Hall would play the girls from Davis Hall. He said they had some great hockey games there. And then, of course, we remember the day when we had Winter Sports Building. And that year when they repaired the roof so it wouldn't leak. And then an artificial ice, and I remember Bob Buston helped us with that. Well, we would appreciate the enthusiasm that Jack Stewart has shown toward the university all these years, and I think we should give Jack Stewart a hand for the $90,000 he contributed to help make this project possible. The largest I'll pass this on to Jack Stewart when I see him in the not-too-distant future. I think we should give a big hand to Mark Foss, because Mark Foss started this thing. He drew the plan for it all on faith. Thank heavens, Mark. I hope you've been paid a little bit for your efforts. It's a great plan and a great arena. I think we should give a hand to Mark Foss. And it's wonderful to have recognized John O'Keefe and Earl Strindon representing the alumni office and the legislature, because the legislature had a lot to do with this. You know, we had to pass a revenue bond on without the help of our legislators, this arena could not have been possible. So I think we should give a hand to Earl and John and the legislators. And in conclusion, I want to say that we had about 2,000 contributors. Contributions of $5, $10, $1,000, and up to $90,000. It was wonderful. One group gave a large percentage-wise, and that was the group of hockey players. I think about 50% of our former hockey players were contributors to this fund. And so to you hockey players, thank you for your loyalty, and we still have a few things we want to finish in the arena, and if you're so inclined, remember us later. Thank you.
Thank you. Len Marty, who's also been a bulwark behind this drive, will now come to the podium and hold forth.
Thank you, Bob. I guess the easiest thing for me to do is to echo the thanks expressed by President Clifford, President Starcher. Oh, I have to keep calling him President. I can't change that. I've worked with him for too long, so it doesn't come out past President or Emeritus or anything else. It comes out President Starcher, no matter how I try to change it. And Lloyd Stone, I'd have to echo their thanks, because if I started to thank people who helped me the last 2 or 3 years, you'd be here all afternoon, so I'm going to say thank you to everyone and echo their thoughts. Gentlemen, ladies, we're begging and borrowing and stealing every day to finish that building. It's been great, the response of people, and we've had a lot of fun trying to finish up. Lawrence Swanson and his Plant Services Division has helped us out, and they take a little from here and a little from there and do work for us, and gradually we're finishing the building. Everyone who gave $120 or more will have his name or whatever names or whatever message they want put on a puck and on a puck wall. Now, we had hoped to have these up by this time. We have the pucks printed. We have some 750, I believe, here. It's a black puck, a regular puck, and it's printed in gold letters. We have a maximum number of letters, and the people indicated what messages they wanted put on, and these will be fastened to a white background board and put up on the walls on either side of the ticket boxes. And we just couldn't get them up. So they will be up sometime during this year, and when you come back, look for your name. They'll be arranged alphabetically, and I'm sure you'll get a kick out of seeing them. Those who gave $1,000 or more will be put on a separate wall. It'll just be marked Major donors 1,000 and over, and on their puck there are a couple of stars which sort of separate them from the others. The $120 ones and up, or the $5 ones, they were all very important, but we did get a lot of big ones. So these will be up. If you're interested, like Lloyd said, and your name isn't going to be on a puck, why, let me know and it can get on there very easily. We can have some more printed. Thank you for coming back. It's been a real pleasure for me to visit with you. Some of you I haven't met as yet. I see you sitting out here, but we didn't have a chance to visit. I'm sure we will before you leave. I want to comment on a couple of other gifts beside Jack Stewart's. We had some large ones from Grand Forks businesses, banks, etc. But we had two others that are quite interesting, and I'm sure you'll appreciate hearing about them. Doug Tegmeyer was a radio announcer here, sportscaster of the year in Grand Forks or in North Dakota for 4 or 5 years. Doug died, and money was sent in for a memorial, and Mrs. Tegmeyer has designated this money for equipping one of the press boxes, and there will be a plaque put up there for that purpose. Also, Dr. Ralph Lee, as you heard in the history, was our team physician for many years. Jim is now the team physician, and Jim's been with us quite a long time. And the Lee family, Jim and his two brothers, Jack and Dick. Jack was one of my gymnasts, by the way. I guess it's John, but I always think of him as Jack. And his mother, Mrs. Ralph Lee, have decided to make it possible for us to have the best athletic training room in the United States for hockey purposes, and we have. They made an excellent contribution to equip this room, and if you go over and look at that building later on, some of you may want to tour it this afternoon, and we'll make that possible right after you leave here. Go down and look at the training room. It's worth seeing. The rest of my comments are in the form of announcements. Those lettermen who reserved tickets ahead of time, and I hope you all did because we're in bad shape on tickets. If you haven't picked them up, I have them here. A number of you have not picked them up. We have only 82 seats for each game that have not been sold on a season reserve basis or are not allocated to students. Now, last night you may have seen some empty seats. Everything on this side was sold. All those were sold. There wasn't an available seat. The ones on the other side belong to students. We promised them 3,000 seats for the $800,000 they put into this, and we stuck to our promise. They have not quite filled any game, and now we're negotiating with them, trying to develop a system whereby we'll know ahead of time if they aren't going to use the 3,000 so we can sell these, because we have an obligation to the public too, and we feel they should have an opportunity to buy these before game time on Friday. So we will work that out. But if you see a few seats empty, remember they've been sold. It's really tough. I shouldn't have sold that many, but it's nice to have that kind of a problem, to have more demand than you have seats, I guess. So if you did not pick up your tickets, come and see me, and we'll try to take care of you. I hope you did reserve them ahead of time. If there is anyone else here who does not have tickets, I really can't tell you what to do right now. You might talk to me, and I might be able to help you later on. All the lettermen, I guess Bob will mention this too, don't forget to stay. We want to get a picture. We've got a photographer here. Also, there's a smoker tonight. Everyone is welcome out at the Westward Ho. Is that right, Bob?
That's right.
And you'll have that too, I suppose. And Charleston room, and come on out. The people who are on the dedication program tonight, will you be sure and stay right after this meeting? We should get together for a few minutes, probably over here on this round table, and maybe we'll go out in the lounge and talk about tonight. Thank you again for coming, and thank you for the wonderful support we've received for a hockey program ever since 1947. I came in 46 before the big time, and it's been a real thrill to grow up with hockey.
Our next guest was known as the Masked Marvel in Roseville, Minnesota. He played in the Minnesota State Tournament as a 7th grader. He was a member of 2 United States Olympic teams. He was the captain of the U.S. National World Team in 1955 He's the coach of the University of North Dakota hockey team. He's also president-elect of the American College Hockey Coaches Association. Rube Bjorkman.
Thank you, Robert. In the sense of levity here, Lloyd, Mr. Stone, I'm not surprised to hear that you have the same problems, or had the same problems with Bob Buston that Channel 8 and I are having right now, that he's spending about half his time coaching the hockey team. It's kind of nice to be on this side of the fence, because I took my lickings many and many years ago from the Dan McKinnons, the Cal Marvins, the Gordy Christians, and the John Noahs. And it's really a pleasure to be working with a fine bunch of people like this. In fact, it took Gordy Christian many years to come over to my side. I can remember playing in the 55 World Games and being on his line. And on a breakout pass once, he was one wing and I was the other. He drilled me right behind the ear, but we've gotten over those things. So it's a special pleasure to be representing the University of North Dakota, and to keep everything very simple. I would like to express my appreciation and thanks for all of those people who've gotten North Dakota hockey to the point it's at today. The fans, the school administrators, the coaches, and certainly all the players. Thank you.
Representing the Sioux Boosters is Bob Jesus Macan.
Thank you, Bob. My remarks are very brief. I came to Grand Forks to go to law school when Billy Reichert was playing hockey, and since that time, these fellows have given us a fantastic amount of entertainment, and on behalf of the Sioux Boosters Club and, I think, the spectators, we really appreciate it. You've given us a heck of a bunch of entertainment. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is probably the top entrepreneur in the Amateur Hockey Association circles in the United States. He has been for a long time. In the 50s, he brought and coached a United States national team to Moscow, Cal Marvin.
Thanks, Bob. You could have said a lot of other nice things about me. Don't be looking at your watch. You don't have to worry. We'll get out of here. He could have mentioned the fact that the wife and I have 12 wonderful children back home. That's probably my greatest claim to fame. Appreciate. Father Tim started things out quite well today up here. Too bad he doesn't fish as well as he preaches. And I've been with John Noah so long that I'm looking for the day when a function like this takes place that one of us Lutherans can get up here and do it. It's always got to be a left-winger, you know. We got to get off Father Tim. I never know what to say with him. I don't know if he just got married. They're all getting married. Back home they tell a story on me when I went to school. I couldn't spell motel, and now I own one. I knew Tom Clifford years ago. That evidently with his profits he could spell university, because now he don't. I met Mrs. Garrett on the way in tonight, and I said if it wasn't for her husband, a lot of us wouldn't be here tonight. And this is very true, because I'll never forget that day we walked in and talked to Red about the possibility of bringing some fellas in here to play hockey. We were all playing around the old States Dominion League then, the boys from Crookston and Hell out in Moore Road and Grand Forks. And he says, I'll tell you one thing, Marvin, as he sat there smoking that cigar, and he says, I've had a lot of fellas walk in here and tell me the same thing on football net. I said, this is probably true, but I think there's a chance there that we can deliver. So we got together, and the fellows came over, and ended up quite a few, and he kept his promise by getting the schedule. And I think he got that hockey team for a few shoelaces and some of Bob Hayes' pink socks in the North City. We had a lot of good times together, and those good times were revolved around fellas like Ben Gustafson out here. He used to take a lot of pride in our hockey club. A lot of us weren't the brightest fellas. I should back that up a little bit. Before the war, I was down at Carleton College for a short day. I went there because my brother was an outstanding basketball and football player for him, and a very good student. So they took another Marvin in a few years later, and that was me in the middle of the year. The president called me in. Mr. Marvin, you're not doing so well alive. And I said, oh, it seems to be a few problems, and Spanish and some of that. Well, he says, you know, we've got a war effort going on. And I said, yes, I'm quite aware of it. He says, have you ever thought of joining them up? I went home for Christmas, joined the Marine Corps, and that's how I met Tom Clifford. But getting back to Ben Gustafson, he used to take a lot of pride in some of the exams that we wrote in chemistry, and we had to get that course in. And he would see, as a little motivation to the other students, he'd say, look at the fine paper that Ted Wilson and Dan McKinnon and people like this. Well, they spent the weekend in Michigan playing hockey, and they come back and write a paper like this. But he didn't go down to Mr. Christian, Mr. Dickinson, and Mr. Marvin, which I always appreciated. The night that we played out in Michigan, I'll never forget that. And I'll never be able to figure out how a guy like John Boy ever made All-American. There isn't anybody on the team that can ever figure that out yet. Well, that's up the power of the press, and somebody has to suffer. But prior to that night and that win out, there was quite an achievement because the newspapers up there next day said they didn't know what side the Mississippi, the state of North Dakota, was on the last night. That's the way that they wrote it up anyway. I remember the memories we had. We used to come over here afterwards when we played. Viad working in the session there, you know. She says, "Cal, have a coat." I says, "Don't do that. He might see you." He always ran a tight shift, you know. Evidently, he's still doing the same job. But you know, it's probably one of the greatest things in sports or in life is things like today and people, the place we go, hockey, people are a strange group. Everybody tells you that. Quite a low bunch. And two bad parts that I could never figure out is a guy like Reg Morelli and the president of the university. I'll never put that one together. Reg, I told you that this morning. He was short on tickets. He's got 14 now, Artie. If you're short, why don't you see him? Well, we had a lot of good times, Sophie. Like I said, some of us didn't finish. We found the future in South Meadows, raising kids. Thanks a lot for coming.
God, Cal sounds more like Will Rogers every day. I'd like to introduce my honored guest today, Ruth Paulson. And now we're going to call for an award to a gentleman who I believe is the only slave that's ever been emancipated, Al Perper. I call on Floyd Richardson.
As president of the UND Alumni Letters Club, this is the second time I've been called on to make this award, and it gives me a lot of pleasure. Athletes by the hundred, coaches, administrators by the dozen come and go. But for 37 years, Albert, better known as Al Perper, has been a constant man of action on the UND athletic scene. Al easily ranks as the oldest in point of service on the present athletic staff. He joined the department in August 1936 under the late C.A. Jack West, then athletic director and head football coach. On the university organization table, Al is called an assistant foreman of the department. That title no way can adequately describe this gentleman's longtime devotion, enthusiasm, and pride in the work he has done for UND athletics and athletes in nearly 4 decades. That may seem like a long time to many of you, but Al, who is now 62 years young, still has very youthful ideas. Since his first day under Jack West, Al has done hundreds of jobs and done all of them with one thought in mind: nothing is ever too good for UND athletes. He's been an equipment manager. He is widely known as one of the best ice makers in the country. He's a fine groundskeeper. The turf at Memorial Stadium has been under his care alone for all these years. He can make the best running track surface that you'll ever want to see. He can manicure a baseball field or an intramural athletic diamond better than anyone. And he's a good mechanic, horticulturist, and what he's forgotten about janitorial work isn't worth knowing. Al is a soft-spoken man. He's never been known to lose his temper and is always willing to help those with problems. While Al has been connected with all sports at UND, it is probably correct to say that hockey is his first love. Al has been in hockey since he learned to skate as a youngster. He played on many local amateur teams and has also coached. He comes from a hockey family. 2 of his brothers, Cliff and Ken, have earned national hockey reputations. Cliff, known to everyone as Fido, was the first North Dakotan to play in the National Hockey League, and following his big-time career, he coached Sioux teams for 7 seasons. Ken, now a teacher in Rapid City, played with the U.S. Olympic team. His older brother Ray, also an amateur standout player, and now lives in Grand Forks, as does Cliff. The 4 Perper boys and 3 sisters are the children of Mr. and Mrs. Adolph Perper, who still live at 1301 First Avenue North. Al was married in 1934 to Vi Pomplin of this city. Vi has been the very efficient manager of our athletic food concession for many years. We salute Al Perper. This is the Letterman's Club Honorary Award presented to Al Perper by the University of North Dakota Alumni Letterman's Club. Congratulations, Al. Thank you. And as a further token of our esteem, we've got a gift certificate that we would like to give to you.
Okay, thanks again. Thank you.
Bob, 2 presidents, many hockey players, many university professors. I want to say thanks to all of them, the people that helped me, which are many. A lot of them aren't here today, but I still want to say I've always loved hockey, all the other sports. I worked, and I always want to say when I do a job, I want to do it to the best. There are a lot of times I've talked to athletes, and I say, you go out there and you do your best. This is what counts. I'm a poor loser. I want to win. and I work every year for the winning team. Now I got a new rink over there. I don't know how I'm going to win because my time is running out, but I'm still going to stick a little while yet. And thanks to everybody for everything you've done.
I think one of the great stories about Al Perper that exemplifies what he's done at the University of North Dakota, the Grand Forks Amerks were playing a Canadian team, so they came in and they went to the ticket office, and there was Al. They said, okay, how do we get in? He said, just go in that door down the basement. And they said, okay, now, who do we give to give our skates sharpened? He said, well, I'll do that later. They went down there, and their manager came up and he said, where do we get our towels? You get it from Al Perper. They go out on the ice, and Al Perper's making ice. Comes the referee, and Al Perper's reffing. We've got a gentleman here today who's coached at the University of North Dakota for 7 years. He made history in hockey for the University of North Dakota and as a hockey player, Cliff Fido Perper. About 3 years ago, he was honored by the city of St. Louis, along with Stan Musial and Joe Garagiola, as the 3 most popular players to ever play in that city. Cliff Fido Perper, would you stand up? Now what we'd like to do fast, we'd like to go to each table, and all the UND hockey players, past, we'd like to have you get up, say where you are now and what you're doing. We'll start with this table over here. Louder. This table. Reg, I understand you're heading up the Mafia for North Dakota too, right? Then I think we've got a gentleman back there who is certainly the voice of the Sioux when they won their national championship in 1959, Bill Rendell. Let's see now, where's the next? You hockey players have gotten so old. We've got a receding hairline back there, sitting next to Mr. Strimden. Play it out here. Okay, let's see. Anything over from this way over? Okay, the table Gasparini. Okay, the immigration desk there. Police table. You know, Paul McKinnon had sideburns back there when hair wasn't in. Okay, let's see. Here we got one of the classiest centers to ever wear a Sioux uniform, James Medved. Jimmy? Bobby Lillo's table. Oh, we missed the Denny Hextall that time, the West Call. West. And then we've got the brother of the famous Christian brothers, Jimmy Christian. Bobby. Peter McKenzie is the best dressed teacher in Minot, and he's the only guy that would scoop all police off his shoes to wear the shoes in dress. Bob Tough. Yeah, where's Savage? Where's Joe? Hey, here is probably the most colorful guy I ever with a green and white. He's the only man that ever played the French horn, played the cello, and coached at a big town of Audubon. And I was trying to Mrs. Meek. George. Yeah, hey, we've got one of the most colorful creating part of the two men, McKee Allman and Tatum. Pete Allman. Okay, Bob Fisher's table. I understand you're the best one in Chicago, go to. Dr. Crumholtz. Then we got Inspector Erkin over here. Afro-symbolist. Sorry about Bob Monroe. He was a student manager during the time Don Norman got out training at Colorado Springs, and the Colorado coaches over there meet him, and he went up to Bob and said, well, your quarters will be at Broadmoor. They thought Norman was stick boy, and that Bob was the coach. He was the nicest dresser on the team. Okay, Bobby Grinna. Then we got the 10th pitcher. I understand they make a vintage stick, though. Well, here's the North Dakota's greatest one-game scorer of all time. Uwe, have I missed anybody over on my far right, or going up to that one with you? Anybody on the left? Already in the firing line, lock and load. And then we've got big Lamar Rubin here. Thank you. I don't know.
Excuse me a minute, I talked to Buzz a month ago, and he wanted to greet all of you. Buzz had a heart attack last summer and wished it could be here, and he had it as a result of But Buzz is well and doing very good. I want to give you regards, and he nothing disrespect to Canadian. And tell him he was an American hockey player.
Coach Gasparini has three young, potential talent players in North Dakota up here visiting for the weekend. Jim, you might want to, from Calgary, Alberta, you might want to introduce them. I think maybe Bill Randell, we'll just wrap this thing up, but Bill Randell and Jack French might want to share a couple of memories with you before we terminate it. Billy?
I think my vivid memory was going to Pokemon one night on a bus and looking up half the team for some reason at home, and there was about 6 of us on the bus, I looked up, kind of groggily, I'd been sleeping around Grand Rapids, and Stan Paskey was driving the bus. I put the coat back over my head and just went back to sleep. Stan was driving when he did, and we got here safely. I also remember, of course, Rich's great goal, which won the championship in 1959. And Donnie Ross carried the puck from behind his own net all the way up the ice, holding off guys who was trying to check, or 3 or 4 people trying to check the puck away from him. Went around behind the other net and passed it out in front, and somebody scored. Donnie is looking like he doesn't remember that at all. But so I've had lots of thrills, and it's been a lot of fun. And I just know that the future of hockey is going to be tremendous here at the University of North Carolina.
Jack French.
Well, thanks, Bob. I've had a chance to say hello to a lot of faces that I remember from the great hockey days of 1947 and shortly after World War II, but I'm looking forward to that opportunity. I guess I cut my teeth on hockey as a result of becoming a close personal friend of Cliff Pfeiffer, and he taught me how to line points of the game of hockey, and I've never forgotten that or the great friendship that Cliff and the rest of you people offered to me when I first started broadcasting. Frankly, we didn't play much hockey up in Louisville.
Play much of anything. No.
So I had to really come down here to get an education. It was one of the more pleasant things that's ever happened to me. The new rink is really great, and I just hope that the people who come along now appreciate the work and the sacrifice and the dedication and the good times that some of you people shared with me over those years. Thanks very much.
All material. You should be sure and get them.
All lettermen get their hockey tickets from Mr. Lee Bonet, and would all the former hockey lettermen stay for about 5 minutes afterwards so we can get a group picture. It's been great. A lot of us thought this time would never come. It's come, it's arrived, and North Dakota will maintain its pinnacle in the peak of college hockey. Thank you very much. Oh yeah, I know. Good to see you again, Mr. Coates. Well, I'm not doing that bit anymore by popular request.
You're a great MC, Brian. That's a great...
Good job. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I'd sure like to.
Thank you, John. Very much.
Fine. I'd sure like to.
Of this speech? All right. Yeah, I'll make one off the station. No, I've got them off the station. I'll make one up for you. Sure. It might have some corrections in it. Hi, Dale. Good to see you again, Mrs. Cole. He's a good friend of mine. Thank you, Mrs. Clever. No, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much. Thank you.